Hi everybody, morning. Welcome to our webinar today, which is all around why you should stop relying on Google Password Manager and how to basically secure your passwords better in the current digital world. I'm really pleased today that I'm not on my own. I'm actually joined by a colleague of mine, Tom Berry, who you can see on camera. Give us a wave, Tom. Morning. Tom is very kindly come in and has volunteered to kind of give us a demo of a particular password management tool, something called Password Boss, which is a product that we are using here at OneFix. So what I want to do, I'm going to try and kick this presentation off. Just give me a second because this has been a bit funny today. So let me see if it's going to work. And here we go. Excellent. Here we go. Great. So as I say, we're going to talk about how we're going to secure your digital life with better tools, why you should stop relying on Google Password Manager. So without further ado, let's get started. Should take around about, I say probably 10 or 15 minutes for me to run through my bits and pieces. Then Tom will jump on, share his screen and do the demo of Password Boss so you can see what a real life password manager looks like. If you've got any questions, because this is a Teams webinar, you can see probably at the top of your screen, there'll be a Q&A button there. Hit the Q&A button, you can pop any questions in there. Jess is in the background and kind of can curate and reply to answers, and we can cover the Q&A stuff off at the end. There is also a chat function there as well, but if you can pop the questions in Q&A, that'd be most appreciated. And so we'll jump to those at the end. Okay, so in terms of what we're going to cover, the key things here, we're going to talk about understanding the importance of password security, some of the limitations and risks of Google Password Manager, so the limitations of storing passwords within your web browser. This also applies for Edge Password Manager, Firefox Password Manager, any of the browser tool password managers. Give you a little bit of guidance around how to create strong and memorable passwords. I mean, one of those key things is to use a password management tool because it can generate those, but I'll also talk you through how you can, some tips and hints you can use to kind of create something a bit stronger and memorable if you're not going to use a password manager. Talk around a few alternatives to using Google Password Manager, as I've already sort of hinted towards. That's going to be talking about a tool called Password Boss and also a tool called Keeper that we use here at OneFix, and there's a variety of other tools that you can get hold of. Tom's going to give us a demo then of Password Boss, and then I've got installed an exclusive special offer for those of you that are on the webinar today to offer you a bit of a kind of exclusive discount as a thank you for attending today. So understanding the importance of password security, why are passwords still so important? And we are desperately trying to get away from using passwords, but they are still super duper important. Passwords are still the primary defense for most businesses, so they still secure around 80% of online accounts. Many people are moving towards passwordless security, so you'll have seen, possibly if you use sites like eBay, I think Amazon are probably doing it now as well. Sites will ask you to set up kind of a security key. So if you're using your fingerprint on devices or you're using your face using something called Windows Hello, a lot of those websites will now ask you to create kind of what they call a security key or a token to try and get away from having passwords in use. But passwords are still hugely prevalent. They're all across the internet. We use them every day for pretty much everything, and they're a massive pain in the backside because they're so tricky to remember and so many sites have different password requirements. Clearly they protect sensitive data, so they help to protect access to our personal and financial data. Everything in our life at the moment is pretty much locked behind a password. If your passwords are compromised, certainly your digital footprint in your digital life is highly damaged and compromised. It's not a great place to be. One of the biggest challenges around passwords is that risk of weak passwords and password reuse. This is a big problem, and we've talked about this for years. We still see a lot of it. People do commonly keep using the same passwords on different websites. Now, the pushback I often hear from people is that they've got a password that's secure. So they say, well, look, my password is strong. I've created a really strong, super secure password. So therefore, I'm using that password on Amazon, PayPal, all the different websites that they happen to use, which is great. And it is a strong password, so it's very unlikely to get guessed. But the problem is if that password ever becomes part of a security breach, if one of those sites ever gets hacked and that password gets released, that password is then a known entity. And actually, one of the first things that an attacker does once they get hold of a password list is they typically try that password across multiple websites and web accounts. So even if you have a strong password, it's still really dangerous to keep reusing that same password across multiple places. So there's some common hacking techniques that hackers use, and I say that these weak passwords are the biggest exploit point. That and phishing are the two huge things that we see a lot of challenges around. What hackers will do, they'll use brute force attacks. So that means typically they'll go and use some powerful computers and just attack, spraying passwords at systems and databases, trying to break in using all different combinations of passwords. There are huge password lists that are available for sale, so you can get them on the regular web, but they're certainly on the dark web. There's a huge amount of stolen password data. These lists can have sort of 2+ billion passwords in them. That's a huge amount of passwords, and if your password is anywhere on that list, if it's ever been breached, it's within a dictionary then that can be used for these brute force attacks, which is why it's so important to ensure that your password is, not on a breach list, is not a common password. And there are some ways to do that I'll talk about in a minute. There's a few stats here. Credential stuffing actually caused over 14 billion attacks worldwide in 2022. So I mean, that's a huge amount of global worldwide attacks caused by just passwords being injected into sites and people trying to break in. And then if you've got a very weak password, they're very easy and quick to crack. There are, again, automated systems and ways that can run kind of dictionaries and combinations of words to try and attack passwords. But a kind of a rule of thumb, essentially keeping it simple, is if your password is short, it's easier to crack. If it's longer, if there's more characters, it's harder to crack. Now, this is hugely, again, related to the types of password you have. So if your password was just something like, I don't know, Arsenal fan 2026, that's a really weak password, even though it's long. If it's a random combination of letters and numbers and it's 12, 15, 18, 20 characters long, much more secure. So then, characteristics, strong password, it would be length, varied characters, an unpredictability to effectively make sure that accounts can't be breached by kind of just guesswork. One of the common things that happens with password attacks is that people will look at who you are, where you are. They'll start to run things like, let's take your road name and some numbers. Let's try your company name and some other data. So there's easy ways that, again, if someone's trying to craft an attack to come against your company, they'll pick some very common things that they know about the company or about the person. It's a cybersecurity stat that accounts with complex password face 99.9% pure security breaches. So that is that's huge. I mean, that's almost the elimination of them. It isn't, because again, people do get their passwords breached and phished, but a complex password reduces all the risk of those kind of external factors of that attack from the outbound. And strong passwords, just say, are the foundation of strong identity protection. So it really is a good thing to make sure you do have strong passwords. And no one wants to have to remember these. That's the whole point. So you do really need a tool in place to help you with this. So in terms of tools, why wouldn't you want to use the one that you get with your browser? What's the downside of using that handy password manager that pops up and says, do you want me to remember this password for you? Well, I think the biggest risk really is around the attack susceptibility of the web browser. Granted, if your computer and your endpoints are perfectly secure and they're never going to run any malware, they're never going to get breached, then sure, then the risk of the password manager in the browser is probably more negligible. But the fact is, the minute any kind of attack or virus or worm gets onto a network, one of the first things that they do is they look to export passwords and security, what they call hashes and data, from the devices. And the way they do this is they will get onto the machine and they will try and find all your stored Windows passwords. Then they'll go to the browser. Because they know where the browser stores the passwords, they'll go and try and breach the browser password manager. So we very commonly see one of the first exploits is that the machine is breached, then the browser passwords are extracted. So storing them in the browser is essentially the problem there, is that it is such a easily exploitable place for the passwords to go from if the machine gets breached. It's also a huge, I would guess, a risk from centralization in terms of the fact that passwords are all in one place. Now, again, you can argue that using a password management tool levies that same risk, that everything is centralized, and there is a degree of that, but that's mitigated by the fact that actually they're outside of the browser system. They're on a separate ecosystem. So therefore, if your device gets breached, it's still another set of steps to try and actually breach those passwords because they're in a completely separate system. There's challenges again around interception of passwords with browser-based password storing. So again, because they're cloud synced, there have been some known injections where people have managed to break into those things and actually grab the passwords as they're syncing back and forth from the cloud. Again, without getting too technical, things like encryption keys can be vulnerable. But essentially, the key thing here is that you've got an increased attack surface because you've got your passwords all within the browser. It's super convenient and it makes life really easy. But actually, it adds let's say, that element of risk that it is one of the first places that those passwords get breached from. So one of the things to think about before I touch on the tools is around creation of passwords and memorable passwords, because if you're not going to use a browser password manager, and maybe you decide you're not going to use a password management tool, although I would recommend you do, it's certainly crucial to have a strong, memorable password. So how do we do that? What are some tips here? So you'll be fully aware, I mean, most websites now are getting so much better at this in terms of prompting you to set a really good, strong password. So hopefully everybody on the webinar today is familiar with the fact of using mixes of uppercase, lowercase characters, numbers, and special characters. A bit like the one that's there in that screenshot of the sort of fake AI keypad there that's got all those different characters on there. I mean, that's a very strong, secure password, pretty impossible to memorize. So what else can you do? Well, one of the things is also avoiding things like common patterns. So make sure that you're not using single dictionary words. You can definitely use dictionary words, and I'll come on to this in a minute, but a single word, not a great place to be. So I'm sure there was a stat I saw the other day about the prevalence of people still using password 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 exclamation mark and those kind of passwords. It's pretty awful. But avoid just a single word because it's super easy to crack and guess. As we've said, automated password generators, so things like a password manager will generate a password for you, and it will generate something like that one on the screen, and then it will store it, so you don't actually ever need to remember the password. So that is a beauty of using a password management tool. But for a memorable password, what you can do is create something called a passphrase. So passphrases are using multiple words, and then you can use some symbols in there as well. So again, if you can see the screenshot there, there's an example there, ocean, exclamation mark, guitar, dollar, pancakes, 42. That's a super brilliant secure password. It's incredibly tricky for machines to guess that and break through that, but also it's not too hard to remember because in your head you can make up a little kind of phrase around that might be, I went down to the ocean, played my guitar and ate pancakes, and there may be some, you have a mnemonic that will help you remember those things. So you can build that yourself based on some key things that you can remember. And again, I would not just go for something about, don't just use children's names or favorite football teams, but you could make a story around that. So again, I'm picking on Arsenal fans. I don't even like football, so apologies if you're an Arsenal fan, but you could say, maybe Arsenal scored 23 goals. I don't know, something silly like that, but that would be much more memorable and much harder to guess than you just having Arsenal 2026. So making those passphrases long, over 15 characters, makes them exponentially stronger. And what that means, without mathematical terms, exponential just means it gets harder and harder. So the more you have, the bigger the leap goes to make it crackable. So the longer that passphrase, the better. One of the challenges you will hit, and this is, I think, what I find is the biggest bugbear with some of this stuff in terms of trying to have password security, is that you'll find some websites you'll go to and they will only let you have a 14-character password maximum, or they'll only let you do certain things, or they won't let you use certain characters. So this is where it becomes a little bit more tricky, but you can work your passphrases around that, and hopefully you can make that work. Again, I think a passphrase works really well for things like a master password. So again, when we talk about password managers, you will have a master password, and that is the thing, that the one password that secures your entire vault of passwords. It's like the master key that locks everything. So first off, you don't want to forget it, because otherwise you can't get to any of your passwords. But that's a great place to use one of these kind of phrase-based passwords, because it's one super secure password that you need to remember in your head, and it unlocks all the rest of them that you don't need to remember. So yeah, password managers, how can they help you avoid password fatigue? Password fatigue is the key thing here, because it is what means you either don't remember them or you start to reuse things. So the beauty of using something to do with your passwords like a password manager is the fact that it will set your password for you. Typically, it won't do phrase-based passwords. There are a few of them that can do some of that, but again, because they're not really a phrase that you need to remember, there's probably not that much value there. So if you make your master password the phrase one, or your computer password the phrase-based password, then let the password manager generate the 20, 24, 30 digit random characters and letters and symbols. That's perfect. Password managers boost the password complexity and diversity because essentially they are creating a completely random password for every site. So even the best of us, if we're not using a password manager, we will end up reusing some elements of a password, or we'll come to common keywords and we'll reuse those because it's human nature. The password manager will create completely random passwords, which makes your life a lot more secure because your password from your Amazon account cannot be used to get to your PayPal account, or even if it is breached. And yeah, so you're reducing your breach risk significantly when you do that and you manage the passwords properly. In terms of the secure alternatives to Google Password Manager, I'll just touch on these quickly, and then we can jump in and actually see this live in action. There's a whole bunch of them, but here at OneFix, we typically are looking at two particular tools. For our clients, we look at a product called Keeper, and we use the enterprise version of Keeper, and we have a product called Password Boss. I'll touch on both of those very quickly in a minute. I think the key thing with all password managers, you want to look for something that's got really good quality encryption, that supports the ability to store things like 2FA keys within the password manager. That's been a bit of bone of contention with some people, but actually being able to store your one-time code for certain sites, again, makes it much easier to bring it into a single place. But if you do have a need within a business to share a password, I don't recommend password sharing, but there are times where passwords do need to be shared across people. Maybe there's a site where you can only create a certain number of accounts or a certain type of account. Putting that account into a password manager and securely sharing it with a colleague is exponentially safer than writing that password down and passing it across, or storing it in an Excel spreadsheet, or doing any of those things that are kind of forced to happen when you have these constraints on you. So doing that makes a lot more sense. You have cross-platform compatibility. So again, most good password managers will be available on all the devices where you need to access your password. So they'll be available on all the different browsers. They'll be available on Windows and Mac. You'll get them on iPhone. You'll get them on Android. So you can carry your passwords around with you. So the two tools that we use, say Keeper. Keeper is the enterprise tool that we would use. It's got some higher level enterprise features. So for certain clients, they really value these things, and actually Keeper's the right tool for them. So things like single sign-on, which means that they can log into a machine with a Windows account, jump straight in, and Keeper logs them in. It's got very high compliance standards. So again, for those customers that may be on a journey of compliance, such as ISO 27001, or need to comply with SOC 2 and some of these higher level standards, Keeper will comply with those and helps you to do that. And there's some pretty smart features in there around kind of making sure, again, your passwords are not reused. They're not reused across your colleagues' accounts as well. It can see the entire of the organization and sort of highlight where there's been password reuse and duplication. It can spot breached passwords and that kind of thing. But it does come at quite a high price point. I don't have the pricing to hand at the moment, but there has been a recent price increase. So we've seen Keeper licenses jump up to somewhere in the region of £7 per user per month. Hence the reason we have another tool, Password Boss. Password Boss is affordable yet robust, so it's much more cost efficient. It's over half the price of Keeper. It's around about £3, £3.50 a user a month. It gives you really good, strong security features, but it's actually, again, balancing the SME's needs. So you don't get the ability for single sign-on, but you do pretty much get everything else. You get the multi-device syncing, multi-device support. It does have some breach monitoring there to try and check if your password's been leaked onto the dark web. It does give you the ability, again, to securely share the password between colleagues, to store your 2FA codes in there and all that kind of stuff. So all of the key things that you would need for most SME businesses, I'd say, for companies under maybe 50 employees, Password Boss is a fantastic password manager, really easy to use, really easy to manage. Which I think brings me, to the time for our live demo. So I think it's always handy to actually see a product in action. So what I will do, I will stop sharing. Tom is coming on video. Hi, Tom, there we go. Let me stop presenting. Tom, you can now hopefully take over and share your screen, and I'll pass to you.
Yep, sure. Okay, hello everyone. Hopefully you're all making notes. Okay, so I'm going to take you through obviously the sort of basic features, setup, everything like that that's involved with Password Boss. So this will be what you're first greeted with after first getting your account set up. So you'll get an email. It will tell you set up passwords, things like that. And then once you're in, it will take you to this page. So the first thing that anyone who's using this will likely want to do is get the web extension installed. This is what's going to take control for all of your autofill, things like that. All the ease of access essentially comes through this. So this is just through the regular extension store. This can be done through any browser you want if you're using Edge, Brave, Firefox, Chrome, whatever it may be. And then that just sort of adds itself in, you get signed in, and then that's ready to go. Okay, so the first thing I'll show you is how you would sort of manually create a record. This is probably the first thing you're going to want to do once you're in. So you just go to sort of home page, passwords, add manually. Here you'll be given a variety of options. These will obviously depend on what sort of record it is that you're inputting. I think in most cases, password website will be the best, but as Craig mentioned, they do have a mobile app version as well. So if you're planning on installing this on your phone, you can save your records as app, and then that will autofill on your phone. For instance, if you need to sign into the Outlook app, if you save it as an app, and then it knows to recognize that that's where the details need to go. So yeah, once that's created, you can come in here. Obviously, all the standard information you can put in the URL for sign-in pages, username, password. So this is the password creator. This is probably the most important thing about any password manager. And this is what's going to make sure that you've all got secure passwords that are very, very difficult for anyone but you to crack. So it's quite a simple sort of UI here. You get your password up here. This little scroll bar is how many characters you'd like. See, as you can see, as I'm scrolling along, that's increasing along the top. And then you can also choose whether or not you'd like to include uppercase, lowercase, numbers, symbols. Obviously, some websites don't like certain symbols and characters and stuff like that. So it's nice to be able to go in and remove them as and when needed. The other primary feature of these records is the 2FA. I don't know about a lot of you guys, but one of the things I hate doing is having to get my phone out and do the authenticator through there, approving things through there. This makes that a whole lot easier. So if you've got any accounts that require 2FA, you can set this up directly through your password manager instead. I believe the way this is usually added is during the process, it will give you a secret key. You can just paste it in there, save it, and then it will start giving you the things. But we'll go through a demonstration of that in a second. But yeah, that's the basic sort of manual creation menu. Moving on from that, I'm going to show you how the extension works in practice, as again, I think that's probably the most important part. No one wants to have to keep flicking between windows all the time. So here we've got a basic Google account creation screen here. This is obviously just a sort of demo, but let's run through this as we would. So name details. We'll keep that a secret for now. Onto mail. Okay, so here you can. Yep, so we could just come up with an email, copy that, add manually into there, and we can just paste that in. Okay, and then here we can go to password, create password. Let's say we want 24 characters. We want all the bells and whistles. Hit save, that will just fill it, and then you can hit copy there. Straight in here, and then obviously once, it's trying to, there we go. That goes through. Okay, it's going to make me do that. We can skip that for now. But that's essentially the process. And then once you've got that account created, what you can then do is if you were to so once you've got that created, just go to the sign-in page here. There we are. It just takes a second to sort of sync through. And then once we've got that there, obviously we can go in, copy, paste things from there. However, what we can actually do is if you're in here, you need to sign in. Once you've got the extension installed, you'll get this little icon shows up in any relevant boxes, you can then hit that. And if I'd done it correctly, there you go. So then that will fill in the details. All you need to do then is hit that. It will fill in that. Obviously, we didn't finish the creating the accounts. That's not working currently. But what it will do is it will fill the email in. It will hit next for you. Fill the password in. Hit next for you. And then if you've also got 2FA set up, it will do the same there. It will auto-fill the 2FA. Which essentially means it becomes a one-click sign-in once you're on the correct page. But that is how the autofill works. Obviously, outside of just passwords and autofill and stuff, there are a few other features. The primary one being Vaults and Share Center, I would say. So Vaults allows you to, much like a SharePoint site, you can create a vault, add members throughout your company. So you can add particular members. For instance, if you have a finance department, you could make a finance password vault, and then that would have passwords for banking apps and things like that, or Sage admins, things like that everyone within a certain group would need access to, but others shouldn't. And it just makes it a lot easier to sort of categorize those passwords, as it were, and share them among teams. As Craig said, obviously we don't want to be passing things across the desk on little scraps of paper. Among that, obviously, sort of acts as a generic vault as well. If you've got anything else you want to add on to it, bank account details, if you have a work card that you need to use once every few days and it's just a bit easier to add it into here, you can then add it into here and autofill as and when needed. Yes. And the remaining thing is currently there is no desktop app version. So everything runs through either the browser or the web extension. But through some playing, I found that we can set it up as a powered web app if need be, which means that it will show up down here as its own little app. So however you guys need it, or however you guys want it to be displayed, we can get that set up for you if you're not a big fan of the browser experience. But yeah, I think that about covers the basics. I think, Craig, now time for some questions if anyone's got any.
Yeah, I think there's a few, so that's great. One thing I'll just add, actually, whilst you've got your screen shared, before you stop, the key thing there is actually as well that security score in the corner. So that's really useful. Where I was saying about being able to kind of see the score of your passwords. Obviously, at the moment, Tom has one password in the vault, so it's 100% secure. It's a very strong password, but you can see there on that screen, it's very handily shows you again the strength of those passwords. It shows you any that have been compromised. It shows you any that have been duplicated or are weak on the right hand side. Gives you a trend over time of your passwords. So you can see at the bottom again where it kind of says all passwords, you've got those headings again. You can click and view which accounts have got weak passwords or old passwords or compromised passwords, because you can configure an age on passwords as well to say if they age out past a certain point they need to be changed. So it does mean it makes the user hygiene of passwords really simple and straightforward. So thanks, Dom. That was a brilliant whistle-stop tour. Appreciate that. I'm going to very quickly cover off the questions that we've had, because I think we've had a few, and then I'm going to talk you through our exclusive offer and discount. So in terms of questions, we have got a couple here. So we've got, let me have a look. Leanne from Gloucester. Hi, Leanne. Nice to see you on here. Would you recommend the free password manager KeePass? We used to use KeePass at OneFix. We used to use KeePass a number of years ago before we switched over to using Keeper internally before we got Password Boss. So it was a little while back. It's great for free. The challenge that we had was this may have improved. I haven't looked at it for a long time, but it was not fantastically good at synchronization. So what we were finding was that we were hosting the KeePass file, we were trying to synchronize passwords to it across multiple users, and we were getting kind of corruptions of that, and it wasn't stellar. For single user use, yeah, it's pretty good. It's again, unless they've changed it, which they may well have done in the past few years, because I haven't looked at it for a while. It was a little bit clunky in terms of the interface and how it interfaced with browsers, but again, as an open source thing for absolutely no cost, it was pretty good. I'm sure they probably have more options around what they can do, but yeah, I mean, I'd recommend any password manager, to be fair. So I think, if KeePass works for you or you've got it at the moment and it's doing the job, great. if you've seen some stuff today that you like the look of, I will say there are also some not-for-profit discounts on Password Boss. I don't believe we have any not-for-profit discounts on Keeper, unfortunately, because again they're slightly different. They're more enterprise driven, but we do have an NFP discount for Password Boss, so that's something to have a chat about after the call. Stuart, use Chrome Password Boss. Some occasions Chrome fails to display the owl and fill the logos. Any suggestion how to force this to work? Off the top of my head, no, I don't know, Stuart. What I'll do is take that one away. I think
I can take that one if you want.
Okay, yeah, perfect, thank you.
Yeah, hi Stuart. So one of the main things that Password Boss in particular uses is that URL tab within your record. So it can sometimes struggle to recognize the sites that you're on and things like that. So what I find is always best is when creating a record, always manually go to the sign-in page you need first and then enter that URL into the record. And then what that's going to do is every time you go to that URL, the record's going to match it up to the record. And then it's going to say, right, now we need to autofill. Whereas sometimes it's just going to be looking at the website and goes, do I think I have a record for this? And obviously sometimes it's going to go, no, better not. But that's best practice. Obviously there will still be some occasions where it doesn't necessarily work. But yeah, best thing to do, chuck the URL into the record, and then you should hopefully see at least somewhat of an improvement in that side of things.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate that. Stuart, if you're still having issues after you've had a play around with that, obviously feel free to just throw a ticket into the support desk and get one of the guys to have a look at that for you. That's not a problem at all. And then I think we had one question on the chat, I think from Peter Haley. Hi, Peter. Quick question. When someone leaves an organisation, how a key password passed on to the organisation as someone is leaving, especially if they're not happy parting? That's a great question. I'll hand on heart. Keeper does do this better. Keeper has a record transfer function. So if somebody leaves, when we set a new user up in Keeper, we would specify that they need to have transferable records, and then those can be reassigned. So someone leaves, that whole entire password vault they have moves over. My recommendation with Password Boss would be actually what Tom touched on with the vaults. I would say that the method of using Password Boss and the passwords, I would say that you want your kind of core corporate records, the ones that you're going to want to have control of, to live in the vault. And be permissioned in such a way, and you can have multiple owners of the vault. So again, if an owner leaves, you're not locked out of the vault. So there's ways that can be built into. And then my recommendation would then be that they use the Password Boss password section for their passwords that are their own passwords, so logins for sites that they would be using. And then, if those people leave, in theory, if they're leaving, say with a login for something like Canva, you hopefully have a master login that you can move that back and reset their login, so you're not worried about their standard individual logins walking away, but anything that's kind of corporate or a single login goes into the main vault. So that's commonly the best way, because even with the kind of the Keeper transfer function, it's horrendously unwieldy once you start moving lots of people's vaults into your own, because you end up with huge duplicates of passwords. So where Stuart mentioned his issue of not getting a kind of pop-up, once you have lots of people's passwords transferred, you go to a site and you end up with about 16 options to fill, because you've got 16 ex-employees, different passwords for the same website. So yes, it is a problem. Yes, it is a bit of a challenge, but I think that's all around the hygiene of how you use the tool and where you store things. So I would say, yeah, general corporate shared passwords in the vault, individual user kind of account passwords that don't need to be shared with individuals, with other colleagues, living in their Password Boss vault, Password Boss password area. And then I say when they do leave, that can be disabled and moved away. Okay, I think that's all the key questions. I think, Steve Brooks replied, yeah, hi Steve, when can you have it? Great question. That leads me on to this part here. So there is an exclusive offer and a bit of a discount for those of you here on the webinar today. We have, for the first 10 signups, so for the first 10 people that come to sign up on Password Boss after this webinar, we'll be offering them 20% off of their Password Boss subscriptions, depending on how many licenses they need for the life of that agreement. So it's a substantial saving, because that will run forever. Obviously, if the base price of the tool goes up, that will go up for everybody, but you'll still get your 20% off. Happy to extend that to non-profits as well. So again, for non-profits, you're going to get a discount and then an extra discount. So it really is a super duper deal for non-for-profits. But yeah, this is a 20% for life for as long as you continue your Password Boss agreements. If you cancel it and then come back, obviously that's then gone, but hold on to that and you get it. The way to get this, if you're one of our clients, then you can reach directly out to Callum. His email address is on screen. Hopefully you know Callum, he'll be your account manager, or give us a call if you want to get in that queue and beat the people that are here. I think there's 15 on the webinar, so there's a chance the whole 10 might sell out. You never know. We will also obviously replay the webinar, so there will be people that will take this up. So do jump on it. Otherwise, there will be an email going around over the next couple of days with the details here to allow you to opt in and say yes, you want to do that. We're happy to arrange individual demos. Again, if you give us a shout, we can hook up a time to show you in a bit more detail how it might work for you, or talk you through that. Again, Callum will be happy to help and have that discussion with you if you need us to put together a quote for you. So you're aware, it is priced per user. Keeper and Password Boss are both priced per user. So essentially, you just need to look at how many users in the organization have the need to store secure passwords. In theory, it should be everybody. For some companies, they choose to just maybe do the finance and admin teams, absolutely fine. But look at those, look at the numbers, ping that over to us. We'll send you over the pricing for that. I say off the top of my head from memory, so I may be wrong. Password Boss is around £3.50 a user a month. Obviously, non-profits get a discount. You'll get 20% off on that. So it's going to come down below £3 a user a month. So that is a very cost-effective way to manage your passwords across the year. And final thing to say is obviously OneFix can provide some support with that. So typically, because it is brutally honestly, it's quite a low value product. The typical rollout for that would provide you with self-help guides of how to get that set up. It is pretty straightforward. Tom's given kind of a quick walkthrough today. It's pretty simple and straightforward to do. However, we are more than happy to help you with a kind of a managed onboarding on that. It just becomes a small piece of project work again that we can put together a quote for you to kind of handhold your users, help them move their passwords out of the browser. One of the key steps really is to take those passwords. And as I said, they are so easy to export. The Password Boss tool, you can hit a button and just import them all straight from the browser, bring them into the password manager. Then we disable the password manager in the browser so that you're not tempted to store them there. We're happy to help with all of that. It's just a little piece of project work. So that actually ran longer than I thought. We're 7 minutes over time, so I appreciate all of you for sticking on and bearing with us. Thank you so much to Tom for your time today to do the demo. Really appreciate that. Hopefully some value there. Please do consider not using your browser password manager going forwards, and do consider a standalone password manager, whether that's Keeper, Password Boss, KeePass, or another tool. But we'd love it to be Password Boss, and we'd love to have a chat with you about that. Thank you very much.